Yeah, I got back from Miami Music Week last week, which was insane.
It's always, yeah.
It's good though.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I was about to ask. I haven't been since like pre-pandemic, but always the wildest. It used to be. I mean, you've been doing this for a while. This is not even really part of the podcast. This is just out of curiosity because when I first started DJing, producing all that, like a long time ago, it was always like South by Southwest was the crazy one. And then Miami, like right when I started, so this is like late 2000s, early 2010s, it was like Miami was kind of on a downswing and Austin was crazy. And I feel like at some point it's switched.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I've actually never played South by Southwest.
Well, because it was crazy for DJs for a while, and then it stopped being good. I don't know what happened, but like the shows got bad and just everybody stopped going. Yeah. And it kind of went back to like the band thing.
Yeah, that's what I know it for, the bands.
Which is true. I mean, you're right that you are correct, but it used to be for DJ stuff, it was crazy back in the day too. Yeah. That's kind of in like a more punk way.
Right.
Like, this is like the era of like Blog House and
where it's like, they were good times.
Oh my God. Yeah. Because like with like Justice and things like that, where the line between like dance and punk and rock and all that is a little more blurred.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of miss that, man.
I love that. That was so good.
Yeah, dude, me too. But how was Miami? I mean, as long as we started off talking about it, how was it for you this year?
It was really good. We did a label showcase. Did something with Insomniac and DJ'd on a super yacht, which was pretty cool.
Wait, what makes a yacht a super yacht?
Well, I was trying to work this out, and then I went on one, and now I know what it is. It's just basically really, really big.
Okay.
has more than one hot tub.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's actually a really good more than one hot tub. I will accept that answer.
Have you ever seen Below Deck? I don't know if it's like a reality TV show on yachts.
Oh yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I watched it in the pandemic, and then it was like that, like all the staff working on it, and it's crazy.
Oh man, that's wild. So I guess super yacht is like maybe one step below like cruise ship. It's like the intermediate.
So. Yeah, I think so.
Damn. What was that party like, man? Super yacht.
It was wild. It was just like Diplo was there. I ended up doing like a back-to-back with Clooney. It's DJ from the UK.
Oh, I know Clooney.
And it was just fun. I got really drunk as well. So I kind of like staggered off the boat. And you're not allowed to wear shoes, but I kept my socks on. And I was like sliding around trying to get off the boat.
You're not aware. Wow, I'm learning a lot about super yachts. You can't wear shoes. There's 2 hot tubs.
It's pretty cool.
Wow. Why no shoes? I have to ask. I don't understand.
I don't know. I think maybe it like ruins the wood or something.
I guess. Yeah. If you're going to spend that much money on a super yacht, you don't want people messing it up, I guess.
No.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, they're definitely not cheap.
No, yeah. And that's such a classic Miami thing too. It's like it's always got to be If it's Miami, if it's South Beach, you can't just get the regular yacht,
No. It's crazy.
Did you get any sleep? How are you in general with like the balancing of the partying and the craziness?
Not great, to be honest. Not great. Yeah, I think probably slept like 3 hours a day for a week last week. And then when I tour, it's so hard to sleep and actually have good sleep as well, not just sleep. So like I always get home Monday or Sunday night and I always just turn my phone off for like a day, just disappear.
It's tough though, right? Especially, so I mean, you're on tour right now, right? And it's kind of like middle of the tour, start of the tour, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, technically it's a tour, but like
it's kind of always
pretty. Right? It's like this the whole year.
Yeah,
it's just kind of packaged as like the beginning of the year.
Yeah, tour. Of course. But I guess all I'm saying is like when it's crazy and you have stuff every weekend, it's like those couple days home that's a weird thing to navigate too. Cause you gotta rest, right? Like you gotta sleep, but then you only have like a day or two. And so it's like, well, what do? Do you try to be like a normal person for a couple days and like live, talk to your family and see your dog, or do you got work to do? Like it's an odd thing to navigate.
I literally do what you just said. I talk to my dog and I like ring family back in the UK and that's it pretty much, and barbecue.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Well, that's good though, man. I mean, to me, that's balance, which I think everybody needs. Cause I think, I mean, you're out in LA and there's such I've talked about this a lot on the show recently, so it's kind of on my mind, but like that hustle culture of LA where everyone's trying to make it. And so there's kind of this like perpetuated myth that you have to be just grinding 24/7. And, if you're taking time off to see your family, then you're failing somehow, that kind of thing.
I fell into that trap when I first moved here like 6 years ago. I was like obsessed with, I'd beat myself up for like taking a day off.
Yeah.
and then it's like, and then you just realize, you do obviously you have to work hard to achieve anything, but there is a line to be drawn, And I think if you don't draw that line, you're not actually working at your best, because if you're just working at the stuff like every day, doing the same thing, it gets so like boring, and I feel like you're less inspired,
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah. And you lose perspective on what you're doing. And it also, all of it becomes less fun, which is kind of
what you did it for in the first place,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
if you did it for the money, you might as well go get a job in like a bank or something. Like, dude, there's easier ways of making money. I'll tell you that.
It's crazy. I've literally said that exact same thing on this podcast. Yeah, it's like, why? What is the point? Because it's doing this kind of stuff. It's like it's an insecure job. Like the bottom could fall out of it at any time. You do have to work super hard. There's not really a structure or a path. So it's like, it's already stressful. So why are you then taking the rest of the fun out?
That's actually the thing I think about a lot is because I've done this project for 5 years, but I did a project before this, and I saw like how the music industry does this.
Yeah.
And that's always in the back of my mind, even when things are going really well. All I'm thinking about is like when it's going to go like that. hopefully not, but
Well, so, but that could go two ways too, right? Like when you have those thoughts, are those anxious thoughts where it makes it hard for you to enjoy what's happening? Or is it the opposite where you're like, oh, this is really special because it's not permanent and you enjoy it a bit more?
Probably both.
Yeah.
Probably both. Like, and it's also, I think every artist has some form of insecurity. They're just different, and that's just mine.
Yeah, no, that's a very
some people doubt
one,
themselves in the studio, and they're like, they struggle in the studio. That's the one thing I don't struggle with, but that's my kind of artist insecurity type thing,
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and it's funny, the thing with the studio too, because I was just having this thought before we got on this chat, because it's been a few weeks for me since I've done one of these podcasts, and sometimes I'll do a ton in a week, and you kind of just get into a routine. But then coming down and sitting down with you, I was like, it's one of those weird feelings. It's only been a couple weeks and I do hundreds of these, but I just felt like I can't, what am I doing? I can't do this.
Yeah.
It's like, it's that weird thing. And it's the same in the studio too. Like, do you ever have, well, maybe you don't doubt yourself in the studio, but even like if you've been off the road for a while and you go to play a gig and it's like, what am I doing?
That's what I get when it's like, if I have a gap, and it can only be 2 weeks. So like normally over Christmas is when the gap is. And it's like, January the 15th, and I'm sitting there like, I can't remember how to DJ. And then you get there and you're like, oh yeah, okay,
yeah. It's such a weird thing, man. I wonder what that is about people. Maybe that's just an artist thing. Maybe that's everybody, but like, what is it about people that we kind of convince ourselves somehow that we don't know how to do like the one thing we actually
the one thing that you can do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. I've always never had a plan B, like a backup, because it's like, for me, if I know I have that backup, I won't put 100% into it. I think working under pressure is quite good, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like I talk about deadlines on here all the time. Deadlines are great, like setting parameters, like making a sandbox for yourself of like these are things I can and can't do. Like I think all that kind of stuff, like, because we could do anything, right? Like it's making art is such a free form endeavor.
Yeah, you kind of make your own rules and your own schedule, I suppose, when you're doing all this.
Yeah,
you have to.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, what's the plan B thing? Not having a plan B is interesting. Was there ever a point in your life when there was like something else you could have gone and done?
No, not really, because I did. I left school at 18, and then I was like DJing in Ibiza and making music. Just doing like random things, but like being able to make a living.
Yeah.
And it kind of just stayed like that all the way up until this project, where it was more than just what I was doing before.
Right.
But yeah, so I've just kind of just been like that the whole time with it.
Well, okay. So, I mean, we'll get into sort of the whole story of all of that, but I am curious, like, was there, in that journey up until now, was there a plan, or was it kind of just like you following this passion that kept evolving and you sort of kept riding with it and taking the opportunities as they came to get to this point? Or like, is what you're doing now, was this always sort of the plan, the thing you were trying to get to?
Yeah, this is always what I've been trying to do. I had another project before this and it got to an okay level, and then it kind of went down, and there was like 3 years after I moved to LA where I was just kind of like doing weird random stuff like movie production, trailer music, like random, just anything I could do, you know.
You did one for The Lonely Island, right?
Yeah.
I had to ask you about that, man.
Yeah. I was gutted as well, because I never went to the premiere for that.
Oh,
you
shit.
know, like, and I love him, and I really wanted to like meet all that whole crew, and just, yeah.
They're hilarious, man. Yeah, that's. I mean, just because it came up, it's a random aside, but like, how does that happen? How, you're just out in LA, like working. You've got a project that's going all right, but you're doing some side stuff. Like, how does something like that come about, where all of a sudden you're producing a song for The Lonely Island that's in there? It's in the Pop Star movie, right?
That one came about because I did the music for 21 Jump Street. Or 22 Jump Street.
Yeah, the theme for it. Is that right?
Yeah. And then after I did that, the company that was like doing all the music were like, do you have anything lying around for this like movie that they're working on? And I had like this dubstep beat that I made that I never did anything with. And I sent them like 5 tracks, and then it was like 2 months later, they sent back like the version with all the vocals on. They're like, yeah, we're going to use it, which is pretty cool.
It's so fun, man.
It's so good. Like, it's just random, but it's cool.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I mean, that's maybe even an interesting question. So that period of time before the Noizu project like really takes off, were you looking at that path of like, well, maybe I can just do this? Like, I'm in LA, I'm making music.
Yeah.
It's in movies. Yeah. Like, maybe this is a path.
I thought that was the way it was going to go. And I suppose actually in hindsight, it wasn't a bad place to be in, because I mean, you know,
Sure.
it was pretty good, but like, it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing full time, you know?
Yeah.
And I used to DJ and I used to love making like house music and electro and all this stuff. It was actually Chris Lake. I sent him some music and he picked it up with this house compilation that he did with Skrillex.
The HOWSLA one, right?
HOWSLA, yeah. And he was basically like, you know, you should change your name, start fresh with this because it sounds, you know, your name's been around. And it was actually his kind of advice that kickstarted this project. So I was like, okay, yeah, cool. Like, we'll just do it and see what happens. And then literally from then, it's just kind of, it's gone like this. Like it never went like that. Like, you know, it's not like John Summit type rise to fame, but it's just been like a really good progressive. Every year's been better than the last, which is great, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Side note, I feel like a dude like John Summit, he knew what a super yacht was from birth.
Yeah. I reckon he's DJ'd on loads.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it's really interesting, man. I mean, that I was just talking to Habstract a few weeks ago, and we were talking about that HOWSLA comp as well. And I just had this thought earlier today that like that compilation, I feel like, I mean, it did well, obviously, and there were big records on it and people liked it at the time. But in hindsight, again, I wonder if that was sort of like really a predictor of what was going to happen a few years later. Like, I feel like that album was a little early. You know what I mean?
I feel like, to be honest, that album was the transition from EDM, if you want to call it that, in the US being predominantly dubstep and bass and big room to the tech house and the house movement that's big now. That was probably the first big thing, and it was pretty early, but at the same time, Chris Lake was already kind of building that foundation back then.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, he's been constant, you know, and he's an inspirational dude for a lot of reasons, that being one of them. And then, I think like the fact that it was on Skrillex's label and it was kind of, which was known for like bass music and more aggressive stuff.
Maybe that's why it did do well, but maybe that's why it was maybe overlooked slightly because it was coming from that world. So maybe if you were into house music, you probably weren't looking at what Skrillex was putting out, you know?
Probably not. Yeah. And it had like obviously that Chicken Soup tune, which was huge I mean, still gets played, but but there was all this other great house music, and you're right. It was kind of this like watershed moment because it was not only like great house music and Chris Lake and a predictor of what was to come, but then also sort of Skrillex like switching lanes a bit. Yeah. And he's such a bellwether for what's happening.
Yeah.
Which is,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Just wild, man. But so to take it back for you, I mean, you were born in what part of the UK before you came out here? You were in London, like central London? What part?
Yeah, an area called Camden, which is like North London.
Yeah, I know Camden.
I lived there where Amy Winehouse is from.
Right.
I lived there. I was born there, and then I moved down south of London in secondary school.
Okay.
I don't know what you call that here.
Second, what?
When you're like,
how old are you in secondary school?
It's like high school, I think.
Oh, high school. Okay. Yeah. So like, 13, 14, 15, something like that. Yeah. Got you. Well, I always wonder this for people who grew up in these sort of storied places like Camden, where Amy Winehouse is from. There's lots of sort of lore about Camden. Growing up there, did you feel any of that? Did it, like, what was it like for you growing up there?
I was quite young when I was in that area.
Okay.
Like because we moved around in between. So, I mean, I used to always go back there when I was a bit older, and it was pretty cool. Like it was back when Amy Winehouse was like at her peak. I don't know. It used to be like where everyone went out. All the indie bands used to play. All the like indie DJs used to play there.
Yeah.
So there was like a real music scene there. And then actually when we moved to the other place, there was a really strong music scene there as well. But it was more like band music.
Okay.
So I was in a band for a long time.
What kind of music? Like indie band?
Yeah. They were good times. I used to play the guitar and keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we used to like roll around London doing like tiny venues, you know, like grungy, you know, to like 5 people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know it well. Yeah.
Yeah. But they were good times. You learn a lot.
Oh man, yeah. You learn a lot, and you're doing it all for kind of the first time, right? So like, everything's new and everything's kind of exciting and romantic, and and you're doing it with friends, right? Like you're all kind of in the same place in your life.
Yeah, I was doing it with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. She was singing, and then like my best friends were playing like the drums and bass and stuff. So. It was just like good memories. But it's funny you say about it being fresh, because that was when I started touring again as Noizu at the beginning. That whole, you know, like 5 years ago, that felt so fresh. Yeah, I had that feeling I had when I was like 18 all over again.
Oh man, that's amazing, because that's hard. That's really hard to get back. That's hard to feel again.
And it's hard to keep as well, because you get so, you don't get used to stuff, but you kind of, I suppose you progress, and there's different things that you have to focus on. Whereas at the beginning, you're just happy that you can play a show again. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, it is hard. I mean, do you do anything now as Noizu, as the 2023 version of yourself, to try to keep yourself in that mentality, to try to make sure that you are still having those fun moments and not just kind of getting run over?
Yeah, I think you just, at the beginning of this year, I like tried to make a conscious effort to really appreciate everything that's coming in this year. Because last year we did so much stuff, and I was just so tired, and I didn't really enjoy anything properly, you know?
Yeah.
I was just so like caught up in what I have to do tomorrow and when am I going to sleep. So like this year, I'm trying my hardest to just be like, have a different approach, I suppose.
Does that take the form of anything? Like, do you know, any of the hippie LA stuff, meditation, yoga?
No, it's just like, you know, when you get on stage and there's a big crowd, or when you've sold out a show, it's like, I just remind myself, that's really good, and you should be happy rather than worrying about how many people are there.
Yeah. You know, yeah, that's such a good point, man. Sometimes all it really is just like stopping for a second, you know?
Yeah. I can't remember who it was. There was some interview with, I think it was like Dave Grohl or something like that. And he said, I mean, obviously they're on another level, but yeah, he was saying that I think like 5 years of their career went by and he didn't remember or appreciate any of it.
Wow.
And it was, it was Kings of Leon.
Oh, okay.
It was Kings of Leon.
Yeah.
And it was when they stopped touring, and then they stopped and they were like, shit, we just did all of this stuff and we didn't really appreciate it at the time. And I remember hearing that thinking, yeah, that's dangerous, you know, because that's like, it's a big chunk of your life.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, it's like we were saying earlier, like the bottom could fall out at any time. Yeah. So it's like, you know, Kings of Leon, they'll probably be fine. But for plenty of people, it's like that might not happen again. And, you know.
No, I mean, for dance music, it's always like this. It changes so much. And it's not the kind of genre of music where you can take a year off, you know, and come back, you know.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Unless you know, change your name and start a new project.
Yeah. Which it seems to be like a lot of people have been doing that.
It does. It does. I think a lot of people are kind of, it's that like post-pandemic, like might as well just go for it kind of energy.
Well, I think in a pandemic, I think for some people, it like really helped them, and for other people, it just like made everyone lost.
Yeah, put them into a
and you're
deep
like one or the
existential
other.
crisis. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like some people had a little moment during the pandemic, which is helping them now. And I feel like I know a lot of people that are finding their feet now because the last couple of years were just like,
yeah. Yeah, no, it's
just
bizarre,
weird,
man. Yeah, the whole thing is fucking weird. It's
yeah.
It's one of those things.
I nearly moved back to England.
Sure. Yeah.
It was like it was the end of 2020, and like obviously my shows had just stopped, and you don't really make a lot of money from club music, you know, publishing and streaming. So the most of the income is from touring, and I was like paying rent in Hollywood, had expenses on the business, like management and random things that we were paying for. And I was like, I don't know if I can keep this going without shows.
Yeah.
It was savage. And then I rang my dad and I was like, I think I'm going to come back. And he was like, just stay there, like find work and ride it out. And then literally not that long after, we released a song called Summer 91, and that like changed absolutely everything.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big hit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it like went gold in like 4 countries.
Yeah.
Which was like mad. So I'm glad I just waited. Because
Well, I wanted to ask you about that record, about Summer 91, because what was the experience of sort of having a hit while you're sitting at home, you know? Because I feel like usually if a song blows up, it's like, then it's go time, right?
Yeah, it was weird. It was, I look back at that period with kind of like, it was probably the best, like happiest time in my career, but there were things I wish I did. So I wish I was on the road. I wish I had that now, because I could have been touring off of that song, and maybe it could have got bigger just because of that, you know. But it was just like it was I don't know, kind of saved everything, to be honest.
Well, sure, yeah, and I feel like, I mean, that record, a lot of your records, I think you're very good at sort of channeling nostalgia and those sort of wistful feelings.
Yeah.
But I sort of feel like it came out at the perfect time. Like, I think people were ready for a record that felt like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if we released it now, I don't think it would have done as well. Because also at that point, anyone that made club music could pretty much stop making club music, and a lot of people were saying, you know, you need to have something to stream, because it's like that's the only thing that's working right now, you know. So we were like, me and my wife were like, okay, we'll try something out a bit more vocally. And we just did that in like only took 3 days as well, really, from start to finish. But it was just and we were listening to a lot of like 90s like English house.
Yeah.
And all that stuff, you know.
Yeah. The piano house, man, that's like very, I mean, it's very close to my heart.
It's probably it is from America, but in the UK, that kind of piano house thing is it's like pop music in the UK. There's always one piano song in the charts.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, because you guys kept it alive, I think. Like it started here, but yeah, I mean, you guys kept it alive and totally sort of reinvigorated, or kept it invigorated, I guess. I mean, for me, like some of the earliest dance music I heard, and still some of my favorite dance music, is like the early UK breakbeat piano stuff.
Yeah, that stuff's so good.
Oh, it's like Prodigy Experience, and you know, I started off as like a happy hardcore DJ back a long, long time ago, and
that's cool.
It was all of those tunes are just piano tunes, you know, more or less.
Yeah, they're just really fast.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just chipmunk sped up piano songs.
That sound is really popping in the UK again. That kind of it's like house, but it's gone up to like 145 BPM. Yeah. It's like really fast and really hard. I don't know if it'll cross over here.
I don't know either. Yeah, it's sort of an open question. I feel like because the UK is always a couple steps ahead, but then I feel like you tell me if you agree. This is kind of just my stereotype, but I feel like the UK listeners, it's slightly more evolved musically to accept like a wider range, and they can sort of contextualize sounds and styles historically and culturally in a way that some Americans can't. And so I feel like some of the stuff that gets really popular in the overseas in general, but UK specifically, is like almost a little too high level to cross over to the States. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's that, and there's also people in the UK. The crowds can be very bored. They get bored very quick, and in general are quite unimpressed with people.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, not everyone, but in general, compared to the US, it's like if you saw a certain DJ play in the US afterwards, like everyone want to have photos. Everyone's like, oh, well, you know, whereas in the UK, it'd be like, oh, so-and-so's playing. And they're like, cool.
Yeah.
Like there's less of a kind of, and I think in a way that drives people, it drives the music scene forward the whole time, because it's just harder to get recognition there.
Yeah, and you got to work harder
people
to get the approval kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's more of an approval thing. You could call it snobbiness, I suppose. But
well, I mean, that's like the British stiff upper lip thing in general, right? Like you get, again, stereotypically, you guys are like not as good at showing emotion, right?
No,
like that.
No. My manager always says that to me, even though he's from England, but he's always like, you're always so underwhelmed about
everything. That's funny though, because talking to you, it doesn't seem like you are, but do you think it's just that you don't outwardly show it?
Maybe, I don't know. I suppose we speak on the phone as well, and maybe, you know, when you speak on the phone sometimes, or on text, it doesn't quite come across how you feel. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because I don't know. I mean, I relate to that to a certain extent. Like I've always been an introvert. I was, you know, I don't know if I'd call myself shy, but I'm definitely not the life of the party guy. But there's plenty of, you know, when I talk to my close friends, it's different than when you talk to sort of just an acquaintance, as far as like how much I'll emote and share how I'm feeling and that kind of thing. And, and then you meet other people. I mean, especially places like LA, New York, where there's a lot of sort of artistically minded people, and some people just like spill it all immediately when you meet them. And I've always find that a little off-putting.
I quite like it though. Sometimes it feels so, it's just like so complete opposite to what I'm like. So it's quite funny.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And in many ways, I'm envious of that. It's like there's some disconnect for me that I just can't always do that. But it seems like that would probably feel nice to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just to have that confidence.
Yeah, have that confidence and just kind of, I guess that's what it is, right? It is just confidence and not worrying about, maybe that's what it is, right? Because is it for you, like worrying what others would think or worrying how you would look, that kind of thing?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I actually don't know.
I don't really know either.
I tell you what, I do know one thing though. I used to really care about what people used to think and about everything. And I hit a certain age and I was just like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. That's
which
good.
Is quite it's very liberating.
No, of course.
Yeah.
What age was that?
It was like 27.
Oh, actually. That's pretty early.
It's pretty early. Yeah. Most people have it like probably in their 30s, maybe.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, because it's funny because you never realize it's coming, but that's like the stereotype again of old people. You look at old people and like the coolest old people, they don't care about anything, right?
No.
And they just can't be bothered with anything. They don't give a shit what you think of them or what they say. No. You know? And it's like that's the coolest.
Like, when you're young, you're like, why are people like that? Why do they not care about all the things I care about? And then as you get older, you realize, oh yeah, I don't care.
Right. They actually just realized that none of it matters. You know?
Yeah.
You know what? Now that we're talking about it, you know what it is? It's not that, for me, it's not that I'm shy, and it's not that I'm worried what other people will think, because I'm not really. I think what it is there's a filter in my head most of the time that's just like, they don't need to know that. Like me saying this or telling them this thing about myself, like, this is not helpful for anyone. No one needs to.
Yeah.
Like, this is just not a useful thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Which I guess is some kind of insecurity too. As long as we're talking about this, am I right in saying that you are somewhat similarly introverted, or at least you used to be as a kid?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So well, here's my question. Going into music, which is a social thing, and you're playing parties and you're going and you're meeting people, if it's promoters or audience or whoever, all the time. Do you think it changed like the way you look at the world or the way you operate socially? Do you think it made you more or less comfortable?
I think in the long term, it made me more comfortable. When I first used to these shows, I was so scared. I was just so like, I don't know, just really overthinking it, and used to have to like plan my set and know what I was going to do and all this stuff. And now I'm comfortable just to rock up and just do whatever and talk to everyone. And I used to be, I don't know, I think it was an insecurity, I suppose, but I used to think people were always going to judge you,
Yeah.
When you go on stage and it's like, oh, if I want, like, I always just think, I wonder if everyone thinks this is good or bad.
Right. Well, that's part of that too, is like practice over time, right? Because eventually you sort of learn how to read a crowd.
Yeah.
And you get more comfortable with the quiet moments because you sort of know that you're leading them somewhere, or that, you're working on something. Or you just realize that like some people enjoy shit in a different way and not everyone. Yeah.
I mean, I from really early on in the Noizu project, I made it my goal to pretty much only play my own music, or like mostly my own music, which was what Chris was doing when he introduced me to the HOWSLA thing. It was like, I used to watch him play and it was just all his own stuff. And I was like, that's probably where I went wrong before, because I was just playing anything that was popular and nothing really of my own that much. And then actually, I probably think that's probably what's helped, is like having some identity and just sticking to your guns and not, I mean, now I literally play 70% Noizu records and 30% records that are on my label. And that's it.
Yeah, there you go. And I think part of that too is probably that caring less what other people think, right? Because you go to a festival, you see somebody else play some big anthem, the crowd goes crazy. In your head, it's like, oh, well, I should probably do that because that looked pretty good, right? But
it still happens. It happens to me the other day.
Of course, and me too, man. But I think you're right that like if you stick to your guns and protect the identity of it a little more, maybe that's a longer road. But I think it's also the more sure one,
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. I think like I don't know. I still see people play those big anthems that aren't theirs, and you see the reaction, and you are like, "Oh, damn, I could have played that."
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's all about for where I'm at with that right now is like I have no problem playing big tune, the anthems. Like for me, it's like, what's going to be fun right now? Whatever the most fun thing is, let's do that. But with the anthems, it's more about. And I think this is sort of an advantage of having a longer career is you can be like, well, what's the anthem that like they aren't playing right now? Which one can I pull back out? That kind of thing.
Because there's so many as well.
Oh,
I mean, it also does depend on the setting. So, I mean, if I'm doing like a festival set, I'm going to play all my own music because that's why you're booked.
Yeah.
And if I do like a hard ticket show, then I'll play most of my stuff. But I suppose if you're like an after party or some like afters or some late night thing, then I'll just play whatever, you know.
No, of course. Yeah.
Because the setting then is very different to a show, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's good too, to be able to operate in different modes and give people different experiences. And it makes you more sort of, it gives some depth to what you do, right? Because somebody can go see you and have a bunch of different experiences. And I think that's important too. And I think you mentioned your record label, and I have to apologize because I have to ask you, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of your label.
Techne.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Is it? It reminds me of Cockney. Is it supposed to?
No. That's quite good, actually.
Yeah.
I get worried though, because it kind of written down obviously looks pretty much like techno.
Sure. Yeah.
And we don't release any techno records. So.
Well, where does the name come from then for the label?
It's Greek. It's a Greek word for art.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
It's like art, or something to do with art.
Yeah.
And and there's no reason for having a Greek word. Just
I like it. Yeah. No, it's an interesting name. When did you start the label? It's been a few years now, right? Like
we started it probably 4 years ago, but it was just for Noizu Records. We didn't release anyone else. And then I think 2 years ago, we started to release other people. So it hasn't been long for releasing other people, but in general, it's been around for a minute.
How's the experience been now that you've started releasing other artists' work and sort of wrapping your head around that side of the business in general?
It's really good, because it's like you get to put other people's music out and help them. It's also super frustrating, and I've learned so much about how political and just, I don't know, like how hard it is to put out music, especially for up and coming or smaller artists.
Like how to put it out and get it heard.
Yeah, and just trying to get the support, you know. It's like if we release someone with a bigger name, just naturally it does better, gets more support from the various companies that put music out. Whereas if it's a smaller artist, it's really hard to kind of get placement. And I thought that side might be easier, but you learn, you know. But it doesn't mean we would stop doing that. Like we would always do that. Keep supporting. Like, they're not unknown, but it's just like people that are coming up, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that's kind of what it's for, you know.
Oh, 100%, man. Yeah, and it actually makes me think about Chris Lake again. I would assume, have you gotten any wisdom from him since he's been doing his label for so long?
Yeah, like I talked to him. When we talk, we don't really talk about running labels. Actually, we should talk more about other stuff. But seeing how he's done it is inspiring. I mean, he has a much bigger platform than I do, so naturally the label is bigger. But I'm trying to build the label so it's like outside of Noizu eventually, so it doesn't have to have that association where it's almost just like a standalone label. We're going to do like events, like Techne events, where we're going to have people play, but I won't even be there. So it's like you kind of separate it.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think for like the longevity of it, you know, it'd be good for it to kind of live on its own. And
well, and you've done that even with the Noizu project a little bit, right? With like the cartoon guy. And...
Yeah. So we started with the cartoon, and we still use it, but mainly for live visuals, you know.
Okay. And it's a bit more of like you, the person, these days.
Yeah, to be honest, yeah, because it's just the way things are, you know, like people because of like social media and all this stuff, you know, it's like hard to just be a cartoon all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true, man.
You have a really busy animator.
Yeah, that's right. For your 10 Instagram stories a day.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just more sustainable. Just not being a cartoon. Because originally we wanted it to be like gorillas, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. And I kind of underestimated how expensive and time consuming all those graphics would be. And, you know, like, I mean, they have someone as part of the band that does it full time, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, on that level, that's more than a full-time job, but yeah.
And like the first couple of years of Noizu, there was no way we could justify.
Of course, man. I mean, I think about that all the time because it's so easy to go crazy with a concept and cool ideas, but then sometimes I think a lot of people sort of lose the fact that you actually have to sit there and like whatever you committed to, you got to sit there and do it. And some crazy concepts can, you know, take your whole life and you won't have time to do anything else. I
feel like, sadly, but just realistically, if you have a crazy concept, all you need is money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really, it's like, that's all it is. You know, it's just, I mean, obviously you have to be talented and have a good vision, but, you know, if we were to have gone down that gorillas route with the cartoon, I would have needed like an investor, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't have the money myself to do like full blown animations and all this stuff.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, people who start off with money, they're starting off with an advantage. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, maybe that's why people's side projects do well the second or third time around, because they've kind of maybe made a bit of money from another project and then they have a bit more money to put into the new one.
Yeah, I think that's true. And probably they've figured out how to spend money more wisely and like what actually is a priority and what actually doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was friends with Pendulum, the drum and bass band. Yeah. And they, I remember when they turned into Knife Party. And that's the same thing. It's like they already had a name. Like everyone knew who they were. And then they had the money. So like everything was in place for when they started Knife Party. They had all the contacts, they had all the money ready, like and it worked out really well.
Yeah, it's smart, man. There's something to be said for, not that they were taking their time, but for the planning aspect of it. I feel like there's always such a rush, like it's sort of an external feeling of like rush and like everything's got to happen now and don't lose your spot, you know, that kind of thing. But I think there's something to be said for taking your time if you're able to deal with that sort of existential stress, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild because now everything's so fast paced. It's like you just feel the need to constantly rush everything, you know?
Right.
Like rush a release, rush a new song out, you know. And actually you can tell normally the quality of if someone's been rushing or if they've just taken their time with something and did their best, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, so, you know, some like taking an example like Summer 91, let me expand that to ask you more broadly for you. Are you a fast songwriter in general, or do you sometimes, you know, sit and tinker for months and months, that kind of thing?
Weirdly, like my most popular songs are the ones that took like no time at all.
Yeah. I don't think that's weird, actually. I think that...
No, maybe there's something in that. And then there's ones that I'll spend so long on and then like, I'm like, yeah, this is perfect. And then we release it and it's like, doesn't do as well as the one that took like a day. And I'm like, It even happened the other day. I did a remix for Mark Knight and Green Velvet. I did it in like a day, super quick. Like it was like 5 hours. And then I played it at EDC Mexico and it sounded great. And it went off really well. And then the label were like, yeah, we like this, we'll take it. And it's just funny how, and then I was like, okay, cool, it's done.
Right.
I don't have to work on it. You know?
Well, so
Whereas
I think
if that I
that's
hadn't have played it,
yeah.
I would have like gone back and worked on it for like weeks and weeks and probably changed it loads.
Yeah. Sometimes the more time you spend, you're making something worse. It's a weird concept, you know?
Yeah. Weirdly. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you need that external someone, whether it's the crowd or the label, to just be like, no, it's good. You're done.
Yeah. Full stop.
Yeah. So, I mean, how did you like talking about your songwriting and production in general? Because I think of you as a very focused, like almost like a technician. When I hear your records, it's like you make your music very well. And it's like this focused thing, and it's identifiable as you. There's a style, like all this stuff we were talking about earlier. Where did that come from? Like, when did you start doing electronic music? Was there an overlap with the band stuff?
Yeah. Well, thank you, by the way.
No, for sure.
So the whole time I was in the band, I was always producing electronic music. I started doing it when I was like 13, so I was pretty young.
What gave you the idea? Like, what was even the impetus to do it?
My dad took me to Ministry of Sound, which is like a club in London when I was 16, and Pete Tong was playing.
Damn.
And I was like, what the hell is this? This is wild.
That's crazy.
Because it was just like a room with like lasers and CO2 and this like music I didn't really know anything about. I was listening to like metal at the time.
I had a very similar background, man. Yeah. I was big into like the new metal wave, and then kind of caught the rave bug.
Yeah, it's weird. The crossover is really weird. I don't know, like, because there was a middle ground. We were talking about it earlier. It's like, there was that middle part that became like Justice.
Yeah.
Where it was kind of like rock mixed with electronic music, and then electronic music just got stronger and stronger. But
well, let me throw this at you and see what you think, because I wrote this down. I was listening to some of your stuff earlier. The track you did with Dombresky called Revival. I wrote down the second I listened to it, I was like, this sounds like it could have been on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack. And for me, that kind of sound, it's like, it is dance music, it's electronic music, but like, it's also, there's like this metal kind of attitude to it. And I don't know, that doesn't exist so much anymore, but there was kind of that era where it all kind of felt the same.
Yeah, I think house and tech house in general right now has gone much softer and much more vibey, which is interesting because I've seen that progression happen in scenes before, and for me that's quite an interesting thing, because I'm like, what's next? Because I feel like something when things go super minimal and super kind of like, so dubstep in the UK, when it first came, it was very minimal. It was very just drums and bass, and it was more like reggae inspired than the stuff that's now. Yeah. And then after that, there was just like this complete rebellion of chill music, and it was just heavy as, like Skrillex and all that stuff. And I kind of wonder if something's about to change in the next couple of years, where like someone's just going to do something that's just going to change the whole scene.
I mean, it's got to happen, right? Like, I think it's almost a guarantee it will happen. The question is sort of, how fast is it going to happen, and what is it going to sound like, Yeah.
Maybe it's like drum and bass, or I don't know.
A lot of people talking about it.
Yeah, but I still think that there isn't a record yet that's kind of, like when Fisher did Losing It.
Yeah.
And it was like, it put tech house on the map, whether people like it or not. It kind of, it brought it to the mainstream. And I feel like there's no record yet in drum and bass that's doing that, but maybe there will be,
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. And I've thought about this a lot, because even when I was, a teenager just starting to DJ, like, I've always loved drum and bass. And I'm sure as well as I do, like, this current conversation about will drum and bass cross over, that kind of thing. It's happened a bunch of times. This is not the first time this conversation has happened over the years. And I think you're right, though, that because there's been so many jungle drum and bass anthems in the UK that sort of cemented its like place on the radio, that kind of thing. But yeah, there hasn't been for the States. There just hasn't been that tune yet.
When I was 16, drum and bass was in the top 20 charts in the UK. It was like the main thing before dubstep came along. And I mean, it only takes one song though, it's like any genre. It's like there's always this one song that just appears out of nowhere. Everyone's focusing on doing this, and suddenly someone comes along and does that. Yeah. And it's like bang, Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, even like it makes me think about like Baltimore and Jersey club music that's having this crazy moment now with like the Lil Uzi "I Just Want to Rock" song, and then the Pink Pantheress and Ice Spice tune, the Boy's a Liar one that kind of has it's understated, but it has that kick pattern. And I was wondering, I'm like, I wonder if people are going to start using that more. That would be a crazy look for pop music. Yeah, be kind of fun. I'd be into it, man.
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it'd be super.
There's no predicting it, and also there's no rules anymore. Like even when I first started in the music industry, I felt like there were definitely like set things you could do to get to a certain point. Or maybe it wasn't easy, but it was like a manager could write it down on a piece of paper, like this is how you make it.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, I don't know how anyone. Do you know what I mean? It's like you blow up on TikTok and you're famous for like 10 minutes, and then no one gives a shit.
Well, how did it? I mean, once you started Noizu and you got that advice from Chris Lake, like new name, start fresh, that kind of thing. How did it go for you? Because I mean, you had the song on the HOWSLA compilation, and then there was that tune like Rave Alarm, which was like, what, a year later, something like that?
Yeah.
And that was a pretty big tune at the time.
Yeah.
Like, how was it for you? Was it just making music, putting it out, and it kind of worked out? Or was there more of a strategy to it?
Well, I think after that HOWSLA song, there was more of a focus to be like, okay, we should try and work on this, And for me, there wasn't any rules. It was just like, I don't know, it was like a new wave of inspiration that doesn't come very often. And I just like felt very like focused, and I kind of knew what I needed to do for the first time in a long time. So I was like, I just stayed in the studio and just kept writing and like sending it to people on Instagram. And Charmy signed an EP, and that kind of did well. And then did Rave Alarm, then some Baby, and like every time it kind of kept progressing, which is really cool.
Yeah. And I guess
it kind of gave the focus as we went along,
Sure. Yeah. And that makes sense. I think that's a good way to operate. And would it be correct to say too that you in your previous project maybe had met some people, had some relationships that you were able to, not use, but like, those relationships were able to serve you in a new project kind of thing?
Only really Chris.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
To be honest, I mean, really, because I don't know. I mean, I knew a lot of people, but at that point, my career at that point had gone down. So it wasn't like if I was messaging people, like they probably weren't going to reply.
Right. Yeah, that's a bummer of a place to be. And I know that feeling.
But it's funny because now I bump into a lot of people that I used to know from the past, and they're still doing stuff, and kind of reconnected a relationship with them. But yeah, it was definitely Chris, the relationship with Chris that helped start it. And honestly, if we didn't know him, we wouldn't have done it in the first place. So
how'd you meet him in the first place?
We used to have the same manager like 10 years ago.
Got it.
When he was in England, and he used to make more progressive house. And even when he was doing the stuff with like Steve Aoki, I think he was managed by him. But yeah, so we knew each other from that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun, man. I mean, that's, for me, again, like the older I get, the more I think about my career, like retrospectively. I think that's sort of one of the most fun parts, is not only the people you meet and the friends you make along the way, but kind of how those relationships sort of weave in and out of time, and you drift apart from people, you come back, all of a sudden somebody you've known the whole time, you're talking all the time again for some reason you never could have predicted. Like, there's something fun about that feeling of kind of like, we're all doing, even though it's easy to sort of feel like everyone's separate and no one's with you, it's like, actually, we're all kind of doing it together, you know?
Yeah, massively. I mean, it's such a small industry as well. And everyone's going through the same roller coaster of, you know, you get a glimpse of good, you get a glimpse of bad, you know, like people that have been doing it long enough know what it's like, you know. So at least you all have that in common. And I remember with the EDM, back in the EDM days with like the big room, we were all doing the same thing, but no one was, it was a really bitchy scene. Like everyone saw each other as an enemy, you know, because you were essentially competing against each other. And the one thing I loved about house, and I'm not sure if it's the same now, but at least those first kind of 4 years ago and those early days of Noizu, it was very much like, it just felt fun, and everyone was like nice to each other. And I don't know, like it was a very welcoming scene.
Yeah.
I think now it's changed because it's got so big and everyone's developed egos. But in general, it's quite a friendly scene compared to other scenes, you know?
Yeah, man. You're spot on. I mean, I always harp on this, and I'm maybe a little too like singularly focused, but for me, the EDM thing, it's like, it just goes back to capitalism for me. It's like all of a sudden all this money came in, and then everyone's just trying to grab the money, and it becomes much less about the community. And there's certain people there who like wouldn't be there if the money wasn't there. And, you know, all of that gets massively in the way.
It did become really, it became really oversaturated and really, just bad attitude in general. You know, people were in it for the wrong reason, and it wasn't really healthy. Or it wasn't going to last, you know. You could kind of see this bubble about to burst once, like, people were doing brand endorsement deals like $1 million.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, whatever they were doing.
Oh yeah, and you could see the crowds changing and just the whole thing. Yeah. I think for those of us who got into it for, you know, weird raver reasons, it was just like hard to even identify what this was anymore, you know? Yeah.
I think for me, the peak was when it was at Ultra, when they had that KFC DJ. I don't know if did you see that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, like, is this really what it's become?
That was the weirdest shit ever, man. Yeah.
I mean, I know it was just like a money grab and like it's just advertisement. It wasn't supposed to be serious, but it's still just, it doesn't have to be serious to show you the state of the scene if that is happening.
Dude, yeah, 100%. It's so funny you say that, because at the time when it happened, I remember seeing it and just being like, that's weird, that's dumb. And then I kind of moved on. But when you look back at it, it's truly insane.
It's so bad. It's so bad. I was watching it the other day on YouTube, and I was just like, how did this happen? Like, God, no wonder it just went to shit.
Oh my God, yeah. It's like the most embarrassing. God, yeah. Makes me feel bad even thinking about it now.
I do genuinely miss that era and those times. I mean, being in Miami Music Week this year, it generally is really different to when it used to be, like the Dutch EDM type thing.
Right.
I remember walking down South Beach and like you couldn't move. It was like so busy.
Oh God, I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And like this year, I mean, Miami was busy. It was super busy, but it's just very different. Like the scene and what's popular and where the clubs are now. And
sure.
Yeah.
And probably people there for different reasons too, right? Like that's one thing I heard from another friend who went out there was just like, it's such a corny thing to say, but like the vibe was great, you know?
Yeah. It's just, it's just different, but it was good to see how strong the scene is, you know?
Yeah, that's good too, man.
I was getting worried for a second. It was kind of, it's in general, some people have become super corny and, you know, like it just, you can always see the end when that starts.
Yeah. Well, it's important. It's kind of like what we were saying before about career stuff where you it's always a little in the back of your mind that like this is not going to last forever. At some point, it's almost inevitable. At some point in our lives, it'll slow down or it'll stop.
Yeah.
And it's the same for music scenes and trends, right? And so I think sometimes, like we said, you got to have those moments where you like stop and look at it for a second and be like, is it done? No, it's still good. Okay, good, great. Like,
also, when people are saying something's done, it's not done. It's like, you know, it just means it's kind of going like that maybe. But like, people were saying that Big Room House was done and it still went on for like 2 more years.
Oh yeah.
Like,
and in some ways I feel like it's kind of coming back.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. I mean, especially with this like progressive, I don't know what they call it, like progressive house, but it's not the progressive house from back in the day, or like the melodic techno stuff. That really reminds me of early progressive house.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, even some of the records, I didn't listen to the whole thing, but off that like Cascade Deadmau5 album, like a couple of those, I was like, oh, this is just like 2010 Dutch house, like straight up. And I liked it. It was good, but I was like,
I like it. Yeah.
It was interesting choice.
And there's like Tale of Us. Do you know Tale of Us?
I know the name.
They're kind of big for their visuals.
Okay.
But they do like more melodic techno, and that kind of reminds me as well of like the kind of early EDM European type thing that was going on.
Yeah, it's fun. Cool. I don't know, man. I like seeing things cycle in and out.
Yeah.
As long as we're talking about this, I did want to talk about just in general. I mentioned it for a second, but your music, especially like the Noizu project, this focused thing, I think you're very good at tapping into that sort of nostalgia, taking a little bit from things that have come before, incorporating it, making it sound fresh, that sort of thing. And I wanted to ask you, I guess sort of generally, like, where does that come from and how do you think about doing that? Because I think there's a lot of dance music that takes something old in a corny way and just sort of like just drops it into a current sort of framework. And it, for me, sounds just a little cheesy. And I don't think your music really ever does that. And I think it's kind of a hard trick to pull off. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about how it's done or how to do it properly, but I think it's interesting.
I mean, I wouldn't say I know how to do it properly. All I know is that I mean, I grew up listening to the 90s and 2000s dance music. So, I mean, it's all kind of throwback now anyway. So maybe it's just like a good timing thing. But even when I was younger, you know, like I was listening to those early records and I think it's just kind of ingrained into my musical taste, I suppose. So I suppose really it's just like, it's finding that inspiration from old records and then just, I suppose, doing modern production and using the techniques that I would use now. I honestly don't know. I think it's fluke.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think part of it is sort of what you were saying earlier about sort of sticking to your guns too, of just, this is me, this is my history, my influences, this is what I like, and I'm just going to do what I like based off of sort of where I've been, you know, and not... Because I think that's maybe what it is now that we're talking about it. My analysis of your music is that you're not trying to make the music... You're not trying to take the influence and simultaneously make it fit into exactly what's happening today. It's more just kind of like this is what I do and this is what I like, and if it fits in, that's great, kind of thing?
I mean, I've always loved like really happy piano rave stuff, right? So for me, Summer 91 would be like, if I had an identity as a song, it would be that, because I was born in 1991, grew up hearing that kind of piano stuff. So for me, the piano of that song defines when I was younger. And then I suppose like the drums in that song are modern. So for me, that song was just like a collective of everything that I am back then and now.
And it's your wife singing on it, right?
And,
so
yeah, and it's my wife singing
so
as well.
It's your
like,
actual
and
wife.
She wrote the lyrics as well. So it's like everything in my life is in that one song.
That's fucking, that's crazy, actually, when you
which
put it
is
like
which
that.
is wild, because it did so well compared to anything I've ever done before. And maybe for me, and I've written a million songs like that in the past and never even released them. But it's like maybe it took all of those things in your life to get to that one moment in time to do that one thing that you probably could never replicate ever again.
Yeah, sure, sure. Or at least you couldn't plan to do it again, right?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, when we put that song out, it was classic. Like the label are like, yeah, where's Summer 92?
Yeah, of course. Where's Fall 91? Yeah.
Yeah, like where's the next one? And we put out a song called Middle, which is like also my wife singing. And it's like just a club record. Really, it's not anything else, and it's completely different. But it did pretty well. I was super happy with how it went, and it streamed well. Loads of DJs played it, and for me, I don't want to go and try and replicate another song because I've already done that. And you do 3 of those songs, and then that's all you're known for. And that's literally my worst nightmare. I honestly, because when you if you listen through the Noizu catalog, you can tell I produced it all in terms of the engineering and the sound, but the songs can be quite different,
For sure.
Because it's boring. I find it boring to just keep making the same thing.
Yeah, I think it is boring. I think that's true. And I think it's also, it's smart to not just replicate your hit. Because again, that's like maybe some short-term success, but you and I both know a lot of people who have not been able to dig out of that hole,
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Well, we mentioned your wife is singing on that tune, and she sings on other songs of yours as well.
Yeah.
This was one of the last things I wanted to ask you was, what is it like, as far as you're married to someone who works in the same world, you work together, you have sort of this shared life and shared career, which I think is somewhat rare. How do you find that? Because for me, I can see the immediate advantages and maybe disadvantages to something like that.
I mean, it's different. That's for sure. I wouldn't say it's typically that common in our scene or in the industry.
Do you know, sorry, not to interrupt, do you know the producer LS Dream, who used to go by Brills?
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had ever met him, because he and his wife, it's the exact same story. They were in
I've never met him. I don't know him. I know of, I know.
So he and his wife knew each other since, they were kids, married, in a band together, toured all over. Now he's a producer. She's a singer. It's
wild.
It's a similar story.
The same.
Similar path. Yeah.
It's good. So she does different, her main music that she focuses on is completely different to Noizu. Her artist name is Annika, and it's she does a lot of cinematic and more indie.
Yeah.
So that's quite nice to have that kind of separation. But really, if you look at the Noizu catalog, she's 50% of the songs.
Right.
She's written all the vocals, but I think that's been really good because it's given this project an identity, because I'm using her for the vocals, and she's writing these top lines, and it's original and it's not sampled. And yeah, this year has been especially a focus to like use her vocals more, even if I just sample it and it's a club record, but not to use any kind of like splice samples or try not to sample anyone, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Are you guys able to turn it off? Like, does it ever, you know, the work-life balance, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, she doesn't tour with me, so
Right.
I tour on my own. She stays in LA, but she came to Miami. She comes to like some of the main things, so we have a good balance, I think, of everything. Like, we're not always in the studio together every day, you know.
Right.
We're actually rarely in the studio ever together, so yeah, it's good balance.
All right, last thing on sort of old times, just because you said it and I need to know. Your dad took you to Ministry of Sound when you were 16. That's a cool dad. Like, what was going on with your dad that he was taking you to Ministry of Sound at 16?
He, I don't know why he was going there. Like, it wasn't because he wanted to. Like, he actually hates house music.
Oh, so he wasn't like a clubber or nothing like that?
No. He was like from the band world. Like, he plays guitar. He loves rock music. He grew up in like Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and he taught me the guitar from a really young age. So he was always kind of pushing me down that route. But he worked for a company, and he had to drop off like a CD or something back in the day to Pete Tong's team or something.
Oh, interesting.
I honestly don't know why we were there, but yeah, it was pretty cool though.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, that's even more interesting that it was kind of a random occurrence that's sort of what sparked it for you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was definitely one of the earliest memories I have of seeing that world and just understanding it differently, I suppose.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. Very cool. Well, is there anything else that we haven't talked about? Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there? We didn't really talk about sort of what's coming up, any of that. Anything you want to get out there?
So good. I mean, I have a new single coming out in April called Lost, which is again with Annika. Touring, loads of music. I mean, yeah, usual. Oh, and we have more hot sauce coming as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. I wrote that down. I didn't ask you about that. Yeah. Are you just always been a hot sauce dude?
I love cooking. Like, actually, talking about plan B, if there was a plan B, I'd probably be a chef. I'd probably go study.
It's funny, man, because you're not alone in that. I'm sure you've had this experience too. Like, a lot of people in our industry also like to cook.
Yeah,
there's something.
I don't know.
About
maybe there's a connection with music, like being a musician and being a chef. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like production in a way. Like, you know, you make a little adjustment that can have a huge impact on the end product, that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah,
and you can experiment, do something unorthodox. It'll change.
Yeah.
What do you cook? What's your thing?
We moved to the Valley in LA, so I bought a big green egg. It's called. It's like a big barbecue thing.
Yeah.
So I like to smoke stuff. Like last night we did salmon. I do everything on there. I'm doing
Nice.
ribs. I'm going to put some ribs on after we talk.
There you go, man. Beautiful.
Yeah.
This is going to be the absolute last thing, and then we'll log off. It's just, I ask people this at the end of each one of these conversations. A very quick thing, kind of like first thing that pops into your head question.
Yeah, sure.
Just looking for a memory from your life. Could be from any time when you were a kid, last week, anytime when in that memory, in a moment, music really had a deep impact on you, really affected you in that moment. And that's meant to be super broad question. It could be something as simple as the right song played on a nice summer day and it was pleasant and you remember it, or like, you know, a song got you through a hard time, or you went and saw somebody play a concert and it was great. Kind of just the first thing that pops into your head. No wrong answer.
The weirdest one, I don't know why this did, but when you said that was when I was 15, I was walking home from school and I was listening to some like drum and bass song. And the whole walk home, I was envisioning being the band. I think I was listening to Pendulum actually. I was imagining being them on stage.
Oh yeah.
And like walking home. And for some reason I got like, I just went into such a deep like dream of wanting to do that. And like, and I could see all my friends in the crowd and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
and then suddenly I was home, and it was like, it used to take me an hour to walk home. So I like zoned out for like an hour just dreaming, which is, I suppose, is the most relevant one because now I am DJing.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, man, if you want to talk about like the transformative power of music, I mean, what's a better example than that, right? Of just like, you not even thinking about it, not even planning it, and just all of a sudden you're in another world. I mean, that's that feeling, the feeling that is sort of the above that experience, like, isn't that what we're chasing the whole time, you know?
Yeah, it's wild. And there's something, and also there's one more thing. There really is something in, I don't know what it's called. And like in LA, people have this like mad hippie version of it, where you basically, you put something out and then it happens.
Manifesting, is that?
Manifesting, right?
Yeah.
So I don't believe in the LA version of manifesting, but I do believe in a certain form of it where essentially if you're just focusing on something every day, like you would, if you just do like 5% of something a day to achieve whatever it is you're trying to manifest, you will do, it's like more than likely to happen. Or if not close.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. That's, I say this a million times on this podcast, but to me, the only definition of success is like not quitting, right?
Yeah,
and if you're just, you stay focused, you stay on that path, it's like you'll get towards whatever you're trying to do eventually, as long as you don't stop and as long as you keep focused on it. And
I mean, most people who are successful are literally just the ones that didn't quit. They're probably not even the best ones. They just didn't give up.
Yeah. Oh, you know 100%, man. How many super talented people do you know who aren't around anymore because they just stopped doing it, you know?
So many,
Yeah. Like,
loads.
I mean, it's crazy. I'm sure everyone has that story. Like, I know plenty of people who are much more talented than me who aren't around anymore because they stopped doing it, you know?
Yeah, for one reason or another, they just stop and then that's it.
Yeah, and no judgment on them, but I think that's what it is at the end of the day. Yeah, definitely. It's crazy, man. Well, hey, man, I'm glad you're still here doing it, and I'm stoked to see what you're going to do next, man. I'm a big fan, so thank you for doing this.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, man. And have a great rest of your day, man. Enjoy those ribs.
Thank you. Take it easy.
Peace, man. Bye.
See you soon.